Your second project for this module is a series of 2 mixed media collages. So again, you're going to use a consistent theme. It's going to look like they go together. The supplies and all of the instructions are listed on Camino. Our inspiration artist for this assignment is Holly Chastain, and she's a collage artist and illustrator from the South in America. And she has a really playful style. She uses found papers, things like old books or old wrapping papers, even just like notebook paper. When she uses new paper, she'll do things like use a tea stain to kind of age it. She creates her own patterns. She has a very distinctive palette, as you can see. And she uses areas that are three-dimensional and photographic juxtaposed with areas that are very flat or graphic or patterned in some way. And typically the pattern has some kind of narrative behind it. It's not completely arbitrary. It helps to drive the story of the images. So when you make your collages, the first thing you have to do is select your sources. I found an old book and some photographs again of bathers and of space. And I thought one thing you guys could think about doing would be using the same transfer technique that we used in the color paintings. So you could take your image, put your transfer paper underneath it, put your image on top, and then trace over the lines of the image. And that will transfer the image, or the lines of the image anyway, onto whatever paper you want. So it could be patterned paper, it could be a book page like I'm using here. So if you like the way that some of her figures are kind of flat and then drawn around, this would be a really nice way for you to execute that without too much trouble. So I tried it, and then I decided that I didn't really want to do that for my demo. So I found this other picture of bathers that I liked. Here I am playing around with what's going to go on top, what's going to go on the bottom. And I decided I wanted to use more of the book pages. And I thought one way that I could make it larger would be to cut up the book pages and then layer them on top of each other and then glue them down. So you're going to use matte medium for this. Matte medium is a clear acrylic. It's basically like paint without color. And here I am, I'm painting down the matte medium on my mixed media paper, similar to a glue. That's exactly how it's behaving. And I'm pressing down the page of my book that's going to end up being my negative space or my background. Here I am using a brayer to help press that down, tack it down. You can see I'm wiping off the brayer as I go through, so I'm making sure that there is not a lot of matte medium on the brayer so that I'm not going to end up pulling up the paper because it's really sticky. Then once that's pressed down, then I'm putting a coat of the matte medium on top of the page as well. So you can do this with glue. That'll work like an Elmer's glue. The issue that there is with glue is that when you come on top of it to paint, the glue is going to want to repel the paint more than the matte medium. So matte medium is really a good way to go. And you have purchased some that was on your supply list. So here is sort of the layered background. And now that that's dry, I'm going to take the 2 bathers and I'm going to figure out where I want to place them. I've glued them down on the side, and now I'm going to do what's called a glaze. So you take matte medium and acrylic paint. It's about 10 parts of matte medium to about 1 part of paint. The more paint you have, the darker the color, the less transparent. The less paint you have, the lighter the color, the more transparent. Here I am squirting some water in there, so you want to add some water so that it's nice and fluid. It's going to end up looking a lot like watercolor, actually. That's kind of the level of transparency that we're going for. So what's really nice about using a glaze is that you add some color and depth, and you can do as many glazes as you want. So you add color and depth. It also starts to pick up any kind of texture that you're creating with your collage. So when I'm doing this over my background, you can see that it's picking up the detail of all of those little strips of book page that I added on. So I'm just painting it out. I decided to paint one of the bathers with the glaze and then one of the bathers without. So one is blue now and one is just black and white. And let's see. Yeah, that's what it looks like. You don't have to do this, but I think it's a really nice element to add. So that's what it looks like so far. So now what I want to do is I want to create some kind of pattern to interact with these bathers. And I thought I could create kind of these cone shapes, very similar to what Holly Chastain does in her work. So I'm drawing out these shapes. I'm using the swimming caps as kind of the base, and then I painted them out in acrylic paint. And then I started drawing some lines or some pattern on them, and then I started painting them. But after I got the paint on there, I realized I didn't really like it. So I cut out the cone shapes. I could have just painted over them again, but I thought it would just be cleaner just to cut them out. And then I put my cutout foreground on top of a fresh piece of mixed media paper and started creating these lined patterns on the woman on the right. I don't know if it really drives the narrative any further, but I thought that the lines had some good rhythm. I'm using the same blue that I'm using for the transparency, so I know that color harmony wise, it's going to work, but you should really think about what kind of pattern you want to create and how that's going to affect the read. And then rather than painting a pattern in the girl on the left, I decided just to, for the speed of this demo, just to collage some space imagery into it. So I'm kind of placing it there. You could do this, and then this is cropped. So this is how the actual finished piece looks. So once you've finished both of them, make sure they relate to each other. You guys are going to photograph them, clean up the photos, and post them to Camino. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Have fun.